get to it. A bombshell plea deal today in the federal Russia probe. Former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn pleading guilty to making false statements to the FBI.
All right, let's bring in Seth. I said it right this time. I always want to call her something else. Let's bring in Seth now from Axios and former federal prosecutor Seth Waxman. Guys, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Yeah, Seth, I'm going to start with you. Let's talk about the indictment. It doesn't prove collusion with Russia. It just talks about lying to the FBI. But is the simplicity of this indictment and this guilty plea, does that signal that there is something bigger to come?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I think when a plea like this goes down, the prosecutors put kind of the bare minimum into the public documents, and that the information that Michael Flynn has probably shared over time is much wider and probably goes a lot to the core of what Mueller's investigation is truly about, which is collusion and conspiracy to influence the election.
And Steph, since we're at this point now, obviously a couple hours into it, what have you heard in the immediate aftermath of the announcement? Because it seems a lot of people were caught off guard by this coming today.
Yeah, I think even the White House was caught off guard, and they just kind of ignored it, kept pushing on with tax reform. This came as a shock to a lot of people. I think people were probably expecting that Flynn would ultimately be indicted or plead guilty, as we saw today, but I think overall the White House especially was caught off guard.
Seth, let me ask you back to that indictment again. In the statement that was released, Michael Flynn said he would be working with or talking with prosecutors. Do you think at the White House right now, you know, what's going on? Are people scrambling? Are they worried? Because this seems to be so far the person who has been the closest to the president. And then we heard this word come out that Jared Kushner was allegedly the very senior official that instructed him to reach out to the Russians.
Yeah, I think they should be nervous. I mean, we're starting to run out of people between the people who have pled guilty and Donald Trump himself. I mean, now we're seeing Jared Kushner being alleged to have made direct contact through Michael Flynn to the Russians. And when you talk about his son-in-law, I mean, you can only pick out 2 or 3 other people, maybe, you know, Donald Trump Jr. and a handful of other, if that are left between him and the president.
Because when you look at the last guilty plea, well, the first was George Papadopoulos, and he was quickly dismissed as a low-level, glorified coffee gopher. This is not a coffee gopher. This is a guy who, for 20-some days, was the National Security Advisor of the United States.
Right, exactly. This is not someone that they can just talk off. The White House is going to have to come up with a serious defense for this. I mean, we've seen over months that the people surrounding Trump have gathered more lawyers around them, so I think we've been kind of suspicious that something big like this was going to happen. But the fact that it's Jared Kushner, not only is he close to the president as an advisor, but he's also the son-in-law of the president, and so it's hard to believe that he wouldn't have mentioned something to the president himself.
I'll tell you what, this week, the number of tweets on the number of topics we got, and there were a lot of people, a lot of sources who said, there's something coming. But it doesn't seem like, again, they had the insight that there was something coming. It's just, it's uncharted waters, it seems.
Yeah, and I think we don't know how this is going to end up, right? These are just little clues, little pieces of the puzzle, and whether this ends with collusion and the president himself being involved, we still don't know that. So we still have to wait and see how everything plays out, but the Mueller investigation is definitely on a hunt.
Seth, as a former federal prosecutor, as you're watching this case being laid out, you know, we know it started with Papadopoulos. We then saw Paul Manafort and his associate, and now we are here to Michael Flynn. How do you think, you know, in the prosecutor mind, is this setup going perfectly to go for the big fish? What is the strategy here?
Yeah, I think it's exactly the typical strategy. In a conspiracy like this, much like the Gambino crime families of back in the 70s and 80s, the prosecutors start low with the low-level operatives, try to move up to the middlemen, or women for that matter, and then ultimately to the target. We see the FBI charts on TV where you have the big man or woman at the top, and you can see that forming just like that in that kind of pyramid shape. So I think it's fitting in just like a federal prosecution would typically arise.
Right. I think we could talk about this for a long time, but our producer gave us the wraps.
We'll have time, though. Seth Waxman, thank you both for joining us tonight. Good to have you here.
We
Thank you very much.
Happy Friday to you both.
You too.